The mahogany desk gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the law office, its polished surface reflecting the cruel satisfaction on Marcus Wellington III's face. Across from him sat Serena, her dark skin ashen with exhaustion, her once proud shoulders now curved inward like a wilting flower. The divorce papers landed with a sharp slap against the wood, scattered and contemptuous. "There," Marcus said, his voice dripping with the kind of cold authority that money had always afforded him. "Sign them, Serena. Let's end this charade once and for all." Serena's trembling fingers hovered over the documents, her wedding ring, a modest band she'd cherished for 8 years, catching the light one last time. The custody arrangement. "Marcus, please. They're my children, too." A laugh echoed from the leather chairs behind Marcus. His mother, Eleanor Wellington, sat with the rigid posture of old money and older prejudices, her pearl necklace a stark white against her black suit. "Your children?" she scoffed. "Darling, you were lucky we even let you play house with our bloodline for as long as we did." The words hit Serena like physical blows. 8 years. 8 years of trying to prove she belonged, of enduring their sideways glances at family gatherings, of watching her children's faces when their grandmother would forget to include them in family photos. 8 years of Marcus slowly transforming from a man who once whispered promises of forever into the stranger who looked at her now like she was something unpleasant stuck to his expensive Italian shoes. Serena built that marketing firm from nothing. Her lawyer, David Chun, interjected weakly. "She deserves more than." "Built." Marcus's father, Marcus Jr., spoke for the first time, his voice a gravelly rasp of barely contained contempt. "She had a little hobby business that we graciously allowed to operate under the Wellington name. Now that name is being revoked, along with any claim she might have had to our son's real assets." Serena felt the room spinning. Her marketing firm, Visionary Solutions, had been her pride, her proof that she could create something meaningful. She'd started it in their garage, working 18-hour days while pregnant with their second child, building client relationships through sheer determination and innovative campaigns that had transformed struggling businesses into success stories. But legally, Marcus's name was on everything. His money had funded the expansion, his connections had opened doors, and now, the house, the cars, the business, all Wellington property, Eleanor continued, examining her manicured nails with theatrical boredom. "And as for those children, well, they'll be better off with proper influences. Marcus will provide them with the education and social standing they deserve. You'll have weekends. Supervised, of course." "Supervised?" Serena's voice cracked. "I'm their mother. I've never hurt them, never." "You fill their heads with all sorts of ideas," Marcus said, finally meeting her eyes. The man she'd fallen in love with at Howard University was gone, replaced by this cold stranger who spoke about their children like they were investment portfolios. Jazz music, that urban poetry, stories about your grandmother's struggles. It's time they learn about real culture, real values. The racism wasn't even veiled anymore. For 8 years, it had lurked beneath the surface of their marriage like a cancer, growing stronger with each of Marcus's promotions at his father's investment firm, with each society function where she was the only black face in a sea of white privilege. She'd told herself love would be enough, that their children would bridge any divide, that proving herself worthy would eventually silence the whispers and sideways looks. How naive she'd been. Serena's hand shook as she signed each page, her maiden name feeling foreign after so many years of being Mrs. Wellington. With each signature, pieces of her life fell away. The colonial mansion in Westchester, where she planted a garden and hung family photos. The BMW she'd earned with her own business success. The college fund she'd started for 7-year-old Michael and 5-year-old Grace. "The children will transition to the private academy next week," Eleanor announced, as if discussing a change in dinner plans. "Much better than that diverse public school you insisted upon. They'll board during the week. Naturally, they need to learn independence." Bored. Serena shot to her feet, the chair screeching against the floor. "They're 7 and 5 years old. They need their mother, not some... They need stability," Marcus cut her off. "Something you clearly cannot provide, given your current circumstances." Current circumstances. As if her impending homelessness was a character flaw, rather than the direct result of his calculated cruelty. The prenup she'd signed in a haze of young love had seemed so romantic then. "We'll never need this," Marcus had whispered. "But my family insists." Now she understood it for what it was. A trap, carefully constructed to ensure she left with nothing. "There's a small apartment in Mount Vernon," David said quietly, sliding another set of papers across the table. "It's adequate. temporary housing assistance until you find employment. Mount Vernon. From a 6-bedroom estate to a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood the Wellingtons would cross the street to avoid. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was being exiled to the same kind of community she'd grown up in, the one Marcus's family had always implied she should have never left. As the meeting concluded with handshakes and false pleasantries, Serena gathered her purse, a designer bag that would likely be the last luxury she'd owned for a long time. Her fingers brushed against something crumpled at the bottom, old receipts, breath mints, and a lottery ticket. She bought it 3 days ago at the gas station, a moment of desperate hope when the cashier had smiled and said, "Feeling lucky today, honey?" She'd forgotten about it entirely. The Wellington family filed out first, their victory complete, and their consciences clear. Eleanor paused at the door, her cold blue eyes fixed on Serena with the kind of look one might give a stray dog that had wandered into a 5-star restaurant. "This is for the best, you know," she said, her voice carrying the weight of generations of entitlement. "You can return to your people now, where you belong." The door closed with a soft click, leaving Serena alone with her lawyer and the ruins of her life. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the Wellingtons climbing into their black Mercedes, their animated conversation suggesting they were already planning dinner reservations to celebrate their victory. 8 years of marriage, 2 children, a thriving business, all of it reduced to a pile of papers and a forwarding address in Mount Vernon. Serena pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting back tears that felt like acid. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not here. Not now. But as she walked to the law office lobby, past the oil paintings of stern-faced judges and the marble bust of Lady Justice with her blindfold and scales, Serena felt something breaking inside her chest. It wasn't just her heart. It was something deeper, something that had once believed in fairness and love conquering all. The lottery ticket crinkled against her fingers as she clutched her purse tighter. $3 in a dream, her grandmother used to say about her weekly lottery ritual. $3 in a dream. Dreams, Serena thought bitterly, were luxuries she could no longer afford. The moving truck pulled away from the Mount Vernon apartment complex with a diesel roar that sounded like mockery. Serena stood on the cracked sidewalk, watching her entire life reduced to a dozen boxes being carried up 2 flights of stairs to apartment 2B, a space smaller than the Wellingtons' wine cellar. "Mama, where's my dollhouse?" Grace asked, tugging on Serena's coat. Her daughter's face was streaked with tears and confusion, her usual bright smile replaced by the kind of bewilderment that breaks a mother's heart. "We had to leave it behind, baby," Serena whispered, kneeling to Grace's level. "But we'll get you a new one, okay? Even better than before." Even as she said it, Serena knew it was a lie. The dollhouse had been a custom-built Victorian mansion, complete with working lights and handcrafted furniture, a gift from Marcus's grandmother before the divorce proceedings had revealed the depth of the family's hatred. Now, they couldn't even afford the security deposit without help from a local charity. Michael stood silent in the hallway, his 7-year-old face carrying a seriousness that belonged on someone much older. "The kids at school are talking," he said quietly. "They're saying Daddy doesn't want us anymore." The words hit Serena like physical blows. "That's not true, Michael. Daddy loves you very much. We're going through some changes." But even Michael, young as he was, could see through the gentle lies. The Wellington Academy had made it clear that their enrollment was contingent on living with their father during weekdays. The message was unmistakable. Choose your mother and lose your future, or choose your future and lose your mother. Mrs. Wellington. The voice cracked like a whip across the courtyard. Serena turned to see Diane Holbrook, a woman from their old neighborhood association, standing by an expensive SUV with a group of other women. The fake smile on Diane's face was sharp enough to cut glass. "I heard about your situation. How tragic." The word tragic rolled off her tongue like honey laced with poison. The other women gathered closer, vultures in designer clothes, their eyes bright with the cruel joy that comes from witnessing someone else's downfall. The children looked so lost. Another woman, Patricia something, Serena couldn't remember her last name, said with theatrical concern, "Poor things. Such a difficult adjustment from Westchester to this." She gestured at the apartment complex with barely concealed disgust. It wasn't a slum by any means. Working-class families lived here, people who worked hard and paid their bills. But to these women, it might as well have been a refugee camp. "Marcus is handling it so well," Diane continued, her voice carrying just enough volume to ensure the growing crowd could hear. "Such strength during this difficult time. And that new girlfriend of his. Stunning, isn't she? A real estate heiress. I heard. Very appropriate." The word hung in the air like a slap. Appropriate, code for white, wealthy, and willing to play by the Wellington family rules without question. Serena's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but she forced her voice to remain steady. The children and I are doing fine, thank you. Of course you are, Patricia cooed. Though I have to ask, what's your plan? I mean, surely you don't expect to maintain the lifestyle you've grown accustomed to on. What is it you'll be doing now? Retail. The laughter that followed was polite, but razor sharp. These women had never worked a day in their lives, but they wielded economic cruelty like master craftsmen. They knew exactly which words would cut deepest, which assumptions would hurt most. Actually, I'm rebuilding my marketing firm, Serena said, lifting her chin with as much dignity as she could muster. It wasn't technically a lie. She was trying to restart her business, even if it meant starting over completely without the Wellington name or connections. Oh, how wonderful. Diane's eyes glittered with malicious glee. I'm sure you'll find clients who appreciate your unique perspective, though I imagine it might be challenging without the Wellington reputation to open doors. The cruelty was breathtaking in its calculated precision, every word designed to remind Serena that everything she'd built, every success she'd achieved, was being rewritten as charity from her ex-husband's family. Her 8 years of 18-hour days, innovative campaigns, and client success stories all reduced to riding on the coattails of Wellington money. Come along, children, Serena said quietly, placing protective hands on Michael and Grace's shoulders. Let's go see our new home. As they walked toward the apartment entrance, she could hear the women's voices behind her, no longer bothering to lower them. Such a shame about those children, mixed up in all this mess. Well, what did she expect? These relationships never last once reality sets in. Marcus is much better off. That Sarah girl from the real estate family. Now that's a proper match. The apartment door closed behind them with a hollow bang, shutting out the voices but not the words. They echoed in Serena's mind as she surveyed their new reality. A living room barely larger than her old walk-in closet, a kitchen with appliances from the 1990s, 2 bedrooms that would require the children to share space for the first time in their lives. Grace immediately ran to the window, pressing her face against the glass. Where's our garden, Mama? Where are my flowers? The flowers. Grace had loved helping Serena tend to the garden behind their Westchester home, carefully watering the roses and giggling when butterflies landed on her small hands. Now, the view from their window was a parking lot and a busy street beyond. We'll plant new flowers in containers, Serena said, her voice thick with tears she refused to let fall. Window boxes. They'll be beautiful, you'll see. Michael had found a box containing their family photos and was staring at a picture of their last Christmas together. In it, the Wellington family looked picture perfect. Marcus in his expensive sweater, Serena in the red dress she'd loved, and the children surrounded by more presents than most families saw in a lifetime. Will we still have Christmas? He asked quietly. The question shattered something in Serena's chest. Not will we still get presents, or will we still have a tree, but the fundamental fear that holidays themselves, the rituals of family and celebration, might be luxuries beyond their reach now. Of course we will, she said, pulling both children close. We'll have the best Christmas ever, just the 3 of us. But even as she said it, she was mentally calculating the numbers. The temporary assistance wouldn't last long. She needed to find work, but her business reputation was tied to the Wellington name, and her personal references were all from a social circle that had just made clear she was no longer welcome. The children needed school clothes, school supplies, stability she couldn't provide. That evening, after the children had finally fallen asleep in their shared bedroom, Grace clutching a stuffed animal, while Michael protectively wrapped an arm around his little sister, Serena sat at the small kitchen table and tried to organize her finances. The numbers were brutal. $847 in her checking account, 3 credit cards maxed out from the divorce proceedings, and monthly expenses that far exceeded her current income. She pulled out her purse, searching for the business card David had given her for a potential client, a small nonprofit that might need marketing help. Her fingers brushed against the crumpled lottery ticket again, and she almost threw it away. What was the point? Hope was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. But something, maybe desperation, maybe the memory of her grandmother's weekly ritual, maybe just a need to believe in something, made her smooth out the ticket and reach for her phone. The lottery website loaded slowly on her cracked screen, the official numbers appearing line by line. First number, 7. Her ticket read 7. Second number, 23. Her ticket read 23. Third number, 31. Her ticket read 31. Serena's heart began to pound. It was probably nothing. She'd matched 2 or 3 numbers before and won $5, maybe 20 on a good day. But she kept reading. Fourth number, 45. Her ticket read 45. Fifth number, 52. Her ticket read 52. Her hands were shaking now, the phone trembling as she scrolled down for the Powerball number. Powerball 18. Her ticket read 18. For a moment, the world stopped. The numbers on her phone screen swam in and out of focus as her mind tried to process what she was seeing. She blinked hard and read them again. Then again. 7, 23, 31, 45, 52, Powerball 18. Every number matched. The prize amount at the top of the screen seemed to mock her with its impossibility. $800 million. $800 million. Serena stared at the ticket in her hand, then at the screen, then back at the ticket. This couldn't be real. People like her didn't win the lottery. People like her lost their children, their homes, their dignity. People like her got mocked in apartment complex courtyards and dismissed by lawyers and forgotten by the world. But the numbers didn't lie. She was holding $800 million in her trembling fingers. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep in her chest. Quiet first, then growing stronger. It wasn't the laugh of joy she'd expected. It was something darker, something that had been forged in the fires of humiliation and betrayal. It was the laugh of a woman who had just discovered that sometimes, the universe has a sense of humor. The sound of it would have terrified the Wellington family if they could have heard it echoing through the thin walls of apartment 2B. But they couldn't hear it. None of them could. Not yet. What would you do if you were in her shoes, humiliated one moment, and suddenly holding $800 million the next? Drop your answer in the comments. And please, if you're enjoying the story, hit that like button and subscribe. It's an act of love that helps us keep telling you these powerful stories. The coffee shop on Main Street buzzed with the mundane conversations of ordinary Tuesday morning. Office workers discussing deadlines, students cramming for exams, retirees sharing gossip over blueberry muffins. Serena sat in the corner booth, her laptop open to what appeared to be job search websites, but her real focus was on the man across from her, Jonathan Hayes, senior partner at Hayes, Morrison & Associates, one of Manhattan's most elite law firms. "You're certain about the ticket's authenticity?" Jonathan asked quietly, his silver hair and expensive suit making him look like exactly what he was, legal counsel to billionaires and Fortune 500 companies. His eyes kept darting to the lottery ticket that lay between them on the table, protected now in a clear plastic sleeve like a museum artifact. "I've checked it 17 times, Serena whispered, her voice barely audible above the coffee shop's ambient noise. The numbers, the date, the retailer code, everything matches. 3 sleepless nights had passed since the revelation. 3 nights of staring at those numbers, Googling lottery fraud stories, and wondering if she was losing her mind. She'd driven to 5 different gas stations to scan the ticket on their lottery machines, each one confirming what seemed impossible. She was the sole winner of the largest jackpot in state history. The media attention will be... Jonathan paused, choosing his words carefully. Overwhelming. Life-changing in ways you can't imagine. Once you claim this, there's no going back to anonymity. Serena's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup. Anonymity. 2 weeks ago, she craved it. The chance to disappear from the Wellington family's sphere of influence, to rebuild her life quietly without the constant weight of their judgment. Now, anonymity was her greatest weapon. As long as Marcus and his family believed she was broken and desperate, they would underestimate her completely. "I need time to strategize," she said. "How long can I wait before claiming?" "You have 180 days from the drawing date. But Serena, you need to understand. Keeping this secret won't be easy. The psychological pressure alone." "I've lived with psychological pressure for 8 years," Serena cut him off, her voice gaining strength. "I can handle 6 months. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, studying her with the keen eyes of someone who'd spent decades reading people in high-stakes situations. "What's your plan?" For the first time since the divorce papers had been thrown at her, Serena felt a smile tug at the corners of her mouth. "First, I disappear. Not literally, but strategically. Let everyone think I'm struggling, maybe even failing. Let Marcus get comfortable with his victory." She pulled out a tablet and showed Jonathan a series of documents she'd been preparing. "I've been researching private equity firms, investment strategies, real estate markets. If I'm going to claim $800 million, I need to know how to turn it into something that lasts generations." The transformation in her voice was striking. Gone was a defeated woman from the law office. In her place sat someone who spoke with the calculated precision of a CEO preparing for a hostile takeover. Second, she continued, I established a network of advisors completely separate from any connections to the Wellington family. New lawyers, new financial advisors, new everything. People they don't know and can't influence. And the custody battle? Serena's expression darkened. Marcus thinks he holds all the cards because he has money and I don't. He's going to use every legal maneuver to prove I'm an unfit mother. Paint me as unstable, impoverished, desperate. Let him. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. That's a dangerous game. It would be, if I were actually powerless. Serena leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. But what happens when a woman everyone believes is broken suddenly demonstrates she can provide the children with opportunities that make the Wellington fortune look like pocket change? What happens when a supposedly unstable ex-wife reveals she's been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers? The plan she outlined over the next hour was breathtakingly complex. She would use the next few months to quietly build an infrastructure of power that no one could see coming. Anonymous LLC purchases of strategic real estate, carefully disguised investments in education technology and children's welfare organizations, the creation of a foundation that would exist on paper but remain dormant until the perfect moment to reveal it. The custody hearing is scheduled for next month, Jonathan noted, reviewing the divorce documents. Marcus's lawyers are already painting you as financially unstable. Perfect. Let them build that narrative. Meanwhile, I'll be documenting everything. Every instance of their racism, every attempt to alienate the children from me, every move designed to prove I don't belong in their world. Serena's eyes glittered with something that was part calculation, part righteous anger. They want to play the game of who deserves these children more? Fine, but they don't know I just changed the rules entirely. The meeting concluded with Jonathan's firm agreement to represent her, along with a network of specialists he recommended. Forensic accountants, child psychologists, media strategists, and investment advisors who could help her build an empire in secret. The lottery ticket went into a safety deposit box at a bank 2 towns away, while Serena returned to her Mount Vernon apartment carrying shopping bags from the dollar store, maintaining the appearance of someone stretching every penny. That afternoon, she sat on the floor of her small living room with Michael and Grace, helping them with homework at a card table that served as their dining room furniture. Grace was struggling with a math worksheet, her small face scrunched in concentration as she tried to add double-digit numbers. I miss my desk, Grace said quietly. The pink one with all the drawers. I know, baby, Serena said, smoothing her daughter's hair. But you know what? Sometimes when we lose things, we discover we're stronger than we thought we were. Michael looked up from his reading assignment. Mama, why did Daddy's family always look at us funny? Even before the divorce. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Serena had spent years deflecting these moments, making excuses for the Wellington family's behavior, trying to shield her children from the ugly reality of the racism they'd been exposed to since birth. Sometimes people have ideas in their heads about how families should look or what kind of person deserves good things, she said carefully. And sometimes those ideas are wrong and hurtful. But we're good people, right? Grace asked, looking up from her math with the kind of earnest confusion that breaks hearts. We're not just good people, Serena said, pulling both children close. We're extraordinary people. And one day, the whole world is going to know it. The promise felt different now than it had 2 weeks ago. Then, it had been the desperate hope of a woman trying to convince herself as much as her children. Now, it was a statement of fact, backed by $800 million and a growing network of the most powerful people in Manhattan. That evening, after the children were asleep, Serena sat at her laptop, researching Marcus's business ventures. What she found was fascinating and useful. Wellington and Associates was struggling more than anyone knew. 3 major clients had pulled their accounts in the past 6 months, and 2 of Marcus's biggest investment plays had gone south. The firm was hemorrhaging money, propped up only by family wealth and increasingly desperate maneuvers. Her phone buzzed with a text from her former friend Rebecca, a woman she considered close until the divorce proceedings had revealed exactly where loyalties lay. Heard you're living in Mount Vernon now. So, sorry. If you need help finding work, I know someone who manages a retail store. It's not much, but it's honest work. Honest work. The condescension dripped through the phone screen. Rebecca, who hadn't worked a day since marrying her investment banker husband, offering to help Serena find honest work in retail. It was a kind of calculated kindness designed to make the giver feel generous while ensuring the receiver knew their place in the social hierarchy. Serena typed back, "Thanks for thinking of me. I'm actually working on rebuilding my marketing business. Should have some exciting news to share soon. The response came quickly. That's wonderful. Though, without the Wellington connections, it might be challenging. Maybe start smaller? Freelance work or something. Just trying to be realistic. Realistic. Another word that meant know your place. But what Rebecca didn't realize was that Serena was being perfectly realistic. She was realistically planning to become one of the most powerful women in the state, with resources that would make the Wellington family fortune look like a trust fund for children. Over the following weeks, Serena maintained her carefully crafted appearance of struggle while building her secret empire. She shopped at discount stores but researched private islands. She clipped coupons but consulted with architects about sustainable mansion designs. She took the bus to save gas money but video conferenced with Swiss bankers about offshore investment strategies. The most challenging part wasn't the deception. It was watching her children adapt to their reduced circumstances with grace that shamed the adults in their lives. Michael had started reading library books about entrepreneurship, telling her he wanted to help rebuild her business. Grace had learned to entertain herself with cardboard boxes and crayons, creating elaborate dollhouses from recyclable materials. "Look, Mama," Grace said one afternoon, showing off her latest creation, a mansion made from cereal boxes, complete with tiny furniture cut from magazines. "It's our new house. When you make lots of money again, we'll live somewhere like this." The innocence of it. The complete faith that their circumstances were temporary, that Mama would figure everything out, was both heartbreaking and motivating. Grace had no idea she was designing a home that would soon be within reach, that her cardboard dreams were about to become architectural blueprints for a real estate portfolio worth hundreds of millions. The custody hearing loomed like a storm on the horizon, and Marcus's legal strategy was becoming clear. His lawyers were building a case around Serena's unstable living situation, her lack of financial resources, and what they delicately termed her inability to provide appropriate cultural and educational opportunities. But Serena had been building her own case, and it was a masterpiece of long-term strategy. Soon, very soon, she would reveal that everything they thought they knew about her was wrong. The broken, desperate woman they dismissed so casually was about to become their worst nightmare. She just needed to remain patient a little while longer. The betrayal came from the last person Serena expected, David Chun, her divorce lawyer. She discovered it by accident, an overheard phone conversation while waiting in his office reception area for what she thought was a routine consultation about the upcoming custody hearing. No, you don't understand. David's voice carried through the thin walls. She's completely broken, living in some ratty apartment in Mount Vernon, barely scraping by. There's no hidden money. Marcus, your family can relax. Serena's blood turned to ice. She pressed herself closer to the wall, straining to hear more. The custody hearing will be a formality. She can't afford decent legal representation, and honestly, she's so defeated, I don't think she'll even fight hard. Your kids will be with you full-time within the month. No additional fee necessary. Consider it a professional courtesy between old friends. Old friends. David Chun and Marcus Wellington were old friends. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. David had been recommended to her by Marcus himself during the early, amicable stages of the divorce. Someone who understands your situation. Marcus had said with what she thought was genuine concern for her welfare. She'd been so grateful for his apparent kindness, so naive about the chess game being played around her. David Chin wasn't her lawyer. He was Marcus's spy, positioned to ensure she remained defenseless and uninformed throughout the entire process. Every strategy session, every piece of confidential information, every moment of vulnerability, all of it had been reported back to the Wellington family. Serena quietly left the office, her mind racing. If David was compromised, what else had she misjudged? Who else in her shrinking circle of support was feeding information to her ex-husband? That evening, she called Jonathan Hayes from a payphone outside a grocery store, a precaution that would have seemed paranoid 2 hours earlier but now felt essential. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "My divorce attorney is working for Marcus. Has been from the beginning." The silence on Jonathan's end stretched for several seconds. "How do you know?" Serena recounted the overheard conversation, her voice steady despite the rage burning in her chest. "Jonathan, if they're willing to plant a spy as my legal counsel, what else are they doing? Are they watching me? Following me? Do they know about our meetings?" "It's possible, but unlikely they suspect a lottery situation. Their intelligence gathering seems focused on confirming your financial weakness, not discovering hidden wealth." Jonathan's voice carried the calm authority of someone accustomed to corporate espionage and high-stakes legal battles. This actually works in our favor. How? Because now we can control the information they receive. David Chun thinks you're broken and defenseless. Let him keep thinking that. Feed him information that makes you seem even more desperate. Meanwhile, we accelerate our timeline. The new strategy took shape over a series of clandestine meetings. Serena would continue using David as her official divorce attorney, but she would feed him carefully crafted misinformation designed to make the Wellington family overconfident. Meanwhile, Jonathan's team would prepare the real legal strategy in complete secrecy, but the betrayals weren't finished. 2 weeks later, Serena made another devastating discovery while researching Marcus's business troubles. Wellington and Associates wasn't just struggling, it was on the verge of bankruptcy. Marcus's father had been covering the losses with family money for months, but even the Wellington fortune had limits. More shocking was how they planned to solve their financial crisis. By claiming Serena's fictional business assets as part of the divorce settlement, David Chun had been feeding them information suggesting she had secret accounts, offshore holdings, anything that might justify seizing more of her assets retroactively. They were planning to destroy her twice. First by taking her children, then by claiming she'd hidden marital assets, and using that as grounds to sue her for money she didn't have. It was a level of calculated cruelty that took her breath away. But the cruelest betrayal was still to come. "Mama, I have something to tell you," Michael said one evening after Grace had gone to bed. His 7-year-old face carried the weight of adult secrets, and Serena's heart clenched with dread. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Daddy's been calling me. On the phone at school." Michael's voice was barely above a whisper. "He says I'm a man of the family now, and I need to help him take care of Grace." "What else did he say?" He asked me questions. About where we live, what we eat, if you cry at night. He said it was our secret, and that good sons help their fathers." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to tell him things, Mama. But he said if I really loved Grace, I'd make sure she got to live in a big house with good food and nice clothes." The manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. Marcus was using their 7-year-old son as a spy, exploiting the boy's love for his sister and his natural desire to be helpful. He was teaching Michael to betray his mother while convincing him it was an act of love. "What did you tell him?" Serena asked gently, fighting to keep her voice calm. "I told him we're doing okay, that you work really hard and we have enough food. But he kept asking if you seem sad, if you talk about money problems, if you ever say bad things about him or Grandma Eleanor." Serena pulled Michael onto her lap, her heart breaking for the impossible position Marcus had put their son in. "Listen to me very carefully, baby. You are not responsible for taking care of Daddy's feelings or for solving grown-up problems. You're 7 years old. Your only job is to be a kid. But what if Grace needs the nice things? What if I'm being selfish by wanting to stay with you?" The question revealed the depth of Marcus's psychological manipulation. He was making a child choose between loyalty to his mother and what he believed was best for his sister, using Michael's natural protectiveness as a weapon against his own family. "Michael, look at me," Serena said, tilting his chin up so their eyes met. "Grace needs her mama more than she needs fancy things. And you need to be with people who love all of you, not just the parts of you that are convenient." That night, after Michael finally fell asleep, Serena sat at her kitchen table and made a decision that would have terrified the old version of herself. She was done playing defense, done being reactive, done allowing the Wellington family to set the terms of engagement. She called Jonathan Hayes at 11 p.m., knowing he'd answered despite the hour. "It's time to go on offense," she said. "I want to know everything about Marcus's business troubles, his father's financial situation, Eleanor's social connections, everything. And I want it documented legally, not just whispered gossip. That's going to require resources, investigations, forensic accounting. I don't care what it costs. Also, I want a child psychologist to document what Marcus is doing to Michael. And I want a media strategy team. When this comes out, I want to control the narrative completely." "Serena, this is going to be expensive, and if you're not careful, it could backfire spectacularly." "Jonathan," Serena said, her voice carrying a steel that would have shocked anyone who'd seen her in that law office 6 weeks ago, "I have 800 million reasons to be confident this won't backfire. And after what they've done to my son, I'm not interested in being careful anymore." The investigation that followed revealed the Wellington family empire was built on far shakier ground than anyone suspected. Marcus Sr.'s investment firm was facing SEC scrutiny for several questionable deals. Eleanor's charitable foundation had accounting irregularities that suggested embezzlement. And Marcus's own business was being kept afloat only by increasingly desperate measures, including the planned seizure of Serena's assets. Most damaging of all was a paper trail Jonathan's team uncovered showing a systematic campaign to alienate the children from their mother. Phone records, email chains, and witness statements painted a picture of calculated psychological manipulation that would horrify any family court judge. But Serena's masterstroke was still to come. 3 days before the custody hearing, she received a call from Rebecca, her former friend who'd offered to help her find honest work. "Serena, I hope you don't mind, but I mentioned your situation to Marcus at the country club charity auction last night. He seemed genuinely concerned about the children's welfare." The casual betrayal was delivered with such innocent cheerfulness that Serena almost laughed. Rebecca had no idea she'd just confirmed that even Serena's former friends were reporting her conversations back to Marcus, treating her private struggles as social gossip to share charity events. "What exactly did you tell him?" Serena asked. "Oh, just that you seem to be struggling financially, that the children are adjusting, but clearly miss their old lifestyle. I thought maybe he didn't realize how hard things have been for you, and that if he knew, he might be more generous with support." More generous. As if Marcus's calculated cruelty was simply a lack of awareness rather than a deliberate strategy to break her spirit. "That was very thoughtful of you, Rebecca. I just want what's best for those children. They deserve stability, and honestly, Marcus can provide that in ways that might be difficult for you right now." There it was, the gentle suggestion that Serena should step aside for her children's sake, delivered by someone who had no idea she was talking to a woman who would soon control one of the largest personal fortunes in America. "You're absolutely right," Serena said sweetly. "The children do deserve the very best, and they're going to get it." After hanging up, Serena smiled for the first time in weeks. The smile wasn't pleasant. It was the expression of someone who had just realized that every betrayal, every act of cruelty, every moment of calculated humiliation had been carefully documented and would soon be used as evidence in a legal and public relations war that the Wellington family couldn't possibly win. Tomorrow, she would walk into that custody hearing as a supposedly broken, desperate woman everyone expected to see. But soon, very soon, she would reveal what she'd really been building during these months of apparent defeat. The Wellington family had taught her a valuable lesson about power. The most dangerous opponent is the one you underestimate completely. They were about to learn that lesson the hard way. If this story has your heart racing, don't just listen quietly. Show us some love by subscribing. And remember, some stories are too close to my heart to share here, but you can get them by joining my private newsletter. The link is in the description. The family courtroom felt like a coliseum, with fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across mahogany benches that had witnessed countless family dramas. Judge Patricia Morrison sat behind her elevated bench like a sentinel of justice, her gray hair pulled back severely and her reading glasses perched at the end of her nose. She had a reputation for cutting through legal theatrics and focusing on what truly served the children's best interests. Serena sat at the plaintiff's table with David Chun, maintaining her carefully crafted appearance of quiet desperation. Her clothing was clean but clearly inexpensive, a navy dress from a discount store, shoes that were polished but worn, a purse that had seen better days. To any observer, she looked exactly like what the Wellington family wanted the court to see, a woman broken by circumstances beyond her control. Across the aisle, Marcus sat flanked by a team of lawyers that probably cost more per hour than most people made in a month. His lead counsel, Harrison Blackwood, was Manhattan legal royalty, silver-haired, aristocratic, with a track record of winning custody cases for wealthy clients by painting their ex-spouses as unstable, unfit, or financially irresponsible. Behind Marcus sat the Wellington family gallery. His parents, Marcus Sr. and Eleanor, wearing expressions of concerned grandparents. His sister Victoria with her husband, and scattered throughout the courtroom, a collection of character witnesses who would testify to Marcus's sterling reputation and stable lifestyle. What none of them knew was that Jonathan Hayes sat in the back row, disguised as a court reporter, ready to observe and take notes for Serena's real legal strategy. The game they thought they were winning was actually being played on a completely different level. "Your Honor," Harrison Blackwood began, his voice carrying the polished authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms full of powerful people. "This case is, unfortunately, quite straightforward. We have 2 loving parents, but only one can provide the stability, educational opportunities, and cultural advantages that these children deserve." He moved with theatrical precision, presenting his opening argument like a prosecutor in a murder trial. "The respondent, Ms. Williams, He deliberately reverted to her maiden name, a subtle way of erasing her connection to the Wellington family. Has experienced what can only be described as a complete life collapse. From a 6-bedroom home in Westchester to a 2-bedroom apartment in Mount Vernon. From financial security to, well, we'll let the evidence speak for itself. Serena felt every word like a calculated slap, but she kept her expression neutral. Let them build their case. Let them create their narrative of her inadequacy. Every word would soon be used against them in ways they couldn't imagine. Mr. Wellington, on the other hand, can provide Michael and Grace with private education at Wellington Academy, cultural enrichment through music and art lessons, summer programs in Europe, and most importantly, the stability of a loving extended family with deep roots in this community. The presentation that followed was a masterclass in character assassination disguised as concern for child welfare. Financial documents showing Serena's modest bank account, photos of her small apartment, contrasted with images of the Wellington estate. Testimony from neighbors about the adjustment difficulties the children were experiencing. The most damaging testimony came from Dr. Richard Ashworth, a child psychologist who had apparently observed the children during their court-mandated visits with their father. The children exhibit clear signs of stress related to their living situation. Dr. Ashworth testified, his voice carrying the weight of professional authority. Michael, in particular, has expressed concerns about his mother's emotional state and their financial security. He's taken on an inappropriate level of responsibility for his age, showing signs of parentification that suggest the home environment is not providing adequate adult stability. Serena's hands clenched under the table. They were using Michael's natural protectiveness, the very quality that made him such a loving son, as evidence against her. The psychological manipulation Marcus had subjected their son to was being twisted into proof of her inadequacy as a mother. And Grace? Harrison asked. Grace is resilient, as many children are, but she's also shown signs of regression, increased attachment behaviors, some difficulty with peer relationships at school. Children need consistency, Mr. Blackwood. They need to feel secure about their future. When it came time for David Chun to present Serena's case, his performance was deliberately lackluster. He called character witnesses who seemed nervous and unprepared. He presented financial documents that only emphasized her limited resources. He even managed to make her own testimony sound offensive and desperate. Ms. Williams, David said, his voice carrying just enough sympathy to seem genuine while undermining her credibility. Can you tell the court about your current employment situation? I'm rebuilding my marketing business, Serena replied, sticking to the script they'd agreed upon. It's challenging without the Wellington name and connections, but I'm confident I can provide for my children. And your current monthly income? The number Serena stated was devastatingly low. Technically truthful, since she hadn't yet claimed her lottery winnings, but designed to make her seem financially unstable. She watched Judge Morrison's expression carefully, noting the subtle frown that suggested concern about her ability to provide adequately for 2 children. The cross-examination was brutal. Harrison Blackwood picked apart every aspect of her life with surgical precision. Her small apartment, her discount store clothing, her children's adjustment to sharing a bedroom, her lack of resources for private schools or extracurricular activities. Ms. Williams, isn't it true that you've borrowed money from local charities to pay your security deposit? Yes, but... And isn't it true that Michael has expressed to school counselors that he's worried about your ability to buy groceries? Each question was designed to paint her as a woman in crisis, someone whose love for her children couldn't overcome the practical realities of poverty. The Wellington family watched with barely concealed satisfaction as their carefully constructed narrative unfolded exactly as planned. But then something unexpected happened. During a recess, Serena overheard a conversation between Marcus and his father that chilled her to the bone. The custody ruling is just the beginning, Marcus Sr. was saying quietly. Once we have the children full-time, we can start the process of alienation. They're young enough that within a year or 2, they won't even want to see her. And the financial claims? Marcus asked. Harrison's confident we can prove she's hidden assets somewhere. Even if she hasn't, the legal fees from defending against our suits will bankrupt her completely. She'll disappear from their lives because she won't be able to afford to stay in them. Eleanor's voice joined the conversation. It's for the best, really. Those children need to understand their place in society. They can't do that if they're constantly being pulled back to that world. That world. As if Serena's love, her sacrifices, her tireless efforts to give them everything they needed were some kind of contamination that had to be scrubbed away. When court reconvened for closing arguments, Serena made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone who didn't know her secret. As Davidson delivered his weak closing statement, she quietly slipped him a note. He read it, his eyes widening in shock, then looked at her with confusion. She nodded firmly. "Your Honor," David said, his voice suddenly steadier, "I'd like to call one additional witness. Ms. Williams herself would like to make a brief statement." Harrison Blackwood looked annoyed but not concerned. What could a desperate woman possibly say that would change the overwhelming evidence against her? Serena stood and walked to the witness stand, her movements carrying a dignity that hadn't been there during her earlier testimony. Something had shifted in her bearing, though no one could identify exactly what. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and strong, "I want to say something about what my children really need." Judge Morrison looked intrigued despite herself. "Proceed." "For the past 6 months, this court has heard a lot about money, about big houses and private schools and summer programs in Europe, about who can provide more material advantages." Serena's gaze swept across the courtroom, landing briefly on each member of the Wellington family. "But I want to talk about what wealth really means." She reached into her purse, the same discount store purse that had been used as evidence of her poverty, and pulled out a manila envelope. True wealth isn't about the size of your bank account. It's about the size of your heart. It's about raising children who see people as human beings rather than social categories. It's about teaching them that love isn't conditional on skin color or social status. The Wellington family exchanged confused glances. Where was this going? "My children have learned more about character in the past 6 months than they learned in the previous 7 years. They've learned that dignity doesn't come from designer clothes. They've learned that family isn't about bloodlines and social registers. It's about people who show up for each other when times get hard." Serena opened the envelope and pulled out a single document. "But since this court seems very interested in financial capability, I thought I should provide some additional information about my resources." She handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Morrison. The judge's expression changed dramatically as she read, her eyebrows rising in what could only be described as shock. "Your Honor," Serena continued, "that document shows the balance in an account I opened yesterday at Manhattan Private Bank. As you can see, I am the sole winner of last month's $800 million lottery jackpot." The courtroom erupted. Harrison Blackwood shot to his feet, objecting to something he couldn't quite articulate. Marcus stared at Serena as if she'd suddenly sprouted wings. Eleanor Wellington made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. Judge Morrison banged her gavel for order. "Ms. Williams, are you saying you've had access to this money throughout these proceedings?" "I've had access to the winning ticket, yes. But I wanted to see what kind of people would try to take children away from a mother they believed was struggling. I wanted to document every act of cruelty, every manipulation, every moment when they chose power over what was right." The transformation in the courtroom was electric. Suddenly, every piece of evidence the Wellington family had presented looked different. Her small apartment wasn't proof of inadequacy. It was evidence of someone choosing to live humbly while building something bigger. Her discount store clothes weren't signs of poverty. They were the disguise of someone playing a longer game than anyone realized. "Your Honor," Serena said, her voice now carrying the authority of someone who controlled more wealth than most small countries, "I could provide my children with any material advantage this court might consider relevant. Private schools, tutors, cultural enrichment, travel opportunities. Anything the Wellington family can offer, I could provide 10 times over." She turned to look directly at Marcus, and for the first time in months, he was the one who looked small and powerless. "But more importantly, I could provide them with something money can't buy. The knowledge that they are loved unconditionally, not for their potential utility, not for how they might reflect on a family's social status, but simply because they exist and they are mine." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Judge Morrison looked from the financial documents to the Wellington family, her expression suggesting she was reevaluating everything she'd heard. "Your Honor," Harrison Blackwood said desperately, "this is clearly a stunt. Ms. Williams is trying to manipulate this court with theatrics." "Mr. Blackwood," Judge Morrison interrupted, her voice carrying steel, "the only manipulation I see in this courtroom is the systematic attempt to portray a woman as unfit based on temporary financial circumstances, while ignoring the emotional and psychological needs of her children." She turned back to Serena. "Ms. Williams, why didn't you reveal this information earlier?" "Because I needed to know who these people really were when they thought I had no power to fight back. I needed to document their true character when they believed there would be no consequences." Serena's smile was sharp as a blade, and I wanted them to build their entire case on the assumption that money determines worth. Now, they'll have to live with the consequences of that philosophy. The custody hearing that was supposed to be a formality had just become the opening battle in a war the Wellington family was no longer certain they could win. But the real shock was still to come. 2 months later, the transformation was complete and devastating. The Wellington Academy headmaster stood nervously in the marble foyer of what was now known as the Williams Family Foundation headquarters, a gleaming 40-story building in Midtown Manhattan that had been purchased, renovated, and rebranded in record time. Dr. Margaret Hastings had come hat in hand to meet with the woman she dismissed as unsuitable for our academic community just 6 months earlier. Mrs. Williams, Dr. Hastings began, her voice carrying the barely concealed desperation of someone whose entire institution's future hung in the balance. I want to personally apologize for any misunderstanding during your children's enrollment process. Serena sat behind a desk that commanded a view of Central Park, dressed in a tailored suit that cost more than most people's cars. But the real power in the room wasn't conveyed by her clothing or surroundings. It was in her stillness, the way she could make someone squirm, simply by letting silence stretch a few seconds too long. Misunderstanding, Serena repeated, her voice perfectly neutral. Is that what we're calling it? The recording that played next was crystal clear. Dr. Hastings' voice from 6 months earlier. I'm sure you understand, Mrs. Wellington, or rather, Ms. Williams, that our institution maintains certain standards. Our families expect their children to be surrounded by appropriate influences. Perhaps a public school will be more suitable for your children's needs. Dr. Hastings' face went ashen as her own words filled the room. Mrs. Williams, please understand, that was taken out of context. The context, Serena interrupted, was that my children were being rejected from a school their father helped fund because their mother didn't meet your definition of appropriate influences. The context was institutional racism disguised as academic standards. The laptop on Serena's desk displayed a financial presentation that made Dr. Hastings' pupils dilate with something approaching panic. The Williams Foundation had quietly purchased a majority of Wellington Academy's debt, along with several properties the school used for their satellite programs. With a few signatures, Serena could close the institution that had rejected her children for not being the right kind of family. However, Serena continued, I'm not interested in destroying institutions. I'm interested in transforming them. The proposal she laid out was both generous and revolutionary. The Williams Foundation would eliminate the Academy's debt and fund a massive expansion, but with conditions, need-blind admissions, diversity requirements, and a curriculum that included comprehensive courses on social justice and cultural understanding. The Wellington Academy would become a model of progressive education, or it would cease to exist. The choice is yours, Dr. Hastings. Evolution or extinction. 30 minutes later, as Dr. Hastings left with signed agreements that would fundamentally reshape her institution, Serena's assistant announced her next appointment. Rebecca, her former friend who had offered to help her find honest work in retail. Rebecca entered the office like someone walking to their own execution, her designer handbag clutched against her chest like armor. She'd seen the news coverage, read the Forbes article about the Williams Foundation's rapid rise to prominence, watched the interviews where Serena discussed her plans to revolutionize charitable giving in America. Serena, Rebecca said, her voice barely above a whisper, I wanted to congratulate you on your incredible success. Thank you. I understand you have a business proposal for me. The proposal was pathetic in its desperation. Rebecca's husband's investment firm was hemorrhaging clients after several high-profile failures, and they needed capital injection from what Rebecca delicately termed like-minded investors. The woman who had condescendingly offered to help Serena find retail work was now begging for financial salvation. Of course, we'd offer very favorable terms, Rebecca continued, her voice gaining false confidence. And naturally, we'd love to have Michael and Grace over for playdates again. The children have been asking about them. The lie hung in the air like a bad smell. Rebecca's children had been explicitly forbidden from associating with Michael and Grace after the divorce, a fact that had been documented by the private investigator Serena had hired months ago. That's very generous, Serena said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But I'm afraid the Williams Foundation has a strict policy about investing in firms with histories of discriminatory practices. She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were photographs from social media posts, email chains, and recorded conversations, a comprehensive record of Rebecca's family's racist comments. Their casual cruelty towards Serena during her lowest moments, their active participation in the social ostracization that was supposed to break her spirit. I'm sure you understand, Serena said, echoing Rebecca's own words from months earlier. We maintain certain standards. The custody ruling had been swift and decisive once Judge Morrison reviewed all the evidence Serena's real legal team had compiled. Marcus's parental rights hadn't been terminated, but they'd been severely restricted. The psychological manipulation of Michael, the systematic attempt to alienate the children from their mother, the racist rhetoric documented in family communications, all of it had painted a picture of a family using children as weapons in their personal war. Michael and Grace now lived with Serena in a penthouse apartment that Grace had designed herself, with input from actual architects who treated a 6-year-old's cardboard box dreams as serious architectural challenges. Michael had his own library and a workshop where he was learning to build the kind of businesses his mother now funded through her foundation. But the most satisfying moment had come not in court or boardrooms, but in a quiet conversation with her children on their first night in their new home. "Mama," Grace had asked, curled up in Serena's lap on a couch that faced floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, "why did Daddy's family say those mean things about us?" "Sometimes people are afraid of things they don't understand," Serena had answered carefully. "And sometimes people think that being mean to others will make them feel better about themselves. But it doesn't work that way." "Are we rich now?" Michael had asked with the practical directness of a 7-year-old. "We have money, yes, but being rich is about more than money. It's about using whatever you have, money, time, talents, love, to make the world better for other people." The Williams Foundation had become exactly that, a vehicle for transforming wealth into systemic change, educational initiatives that created opportunities for underserved communities, housing developments that prioritized affordability alongside quality, business incubation programs that specifically supported entrepreneurs who had been overlooked by traditional funding sources. The social media announcement had been perfectly calibrated for maximum impact. 6 months ago, I was told I didn't belong in certain spaces, that my children would be better off without my influence, that success belonged to people who looked different than us. Today, the Williams Foundation announces our first billion-dollar initiative to ensure no child is ever told they don't belong anywhere. Sometimes the best revenge is proving them wrong, then using your success to make sure they can never be wrong about someone else the same way again. Hashtag transform not destroy. Hashtag every child belongs. The post had gone viral within hours, generating millions of shares and transforming Serena from a lottery winner into a social justice icon. The comments section had become a collection of stories from people who had faced similar discrimination, who had been underestimated and dismissed, who were finding hope in her example. But the real victory wasn't the public acclaim or the business success. It was in the quiet moments when Grace would show off her reading progress, or when Michael would explain his latest invention idea, or when both children would talk about their friends at their new school, a diverse, progressive institution where their mixed heritage was celebrated rather than tolerated. The Wellington family had tried to destroy her by taking away everything she'd built. Instead, they had forced her to discover what she was truly capable of building when all the artificial constraints were removed. Marcus had made one final attempt at reconciliation, showing up at her office unannounced with flowers and apologies that rang as hollow as campaign promises. He'd tried to rewrite history, to suggest their marriage had failed due to external pressures rather than his own choices, to position himself as someone who deserved to share in her newfound success. "I always knew you were capable of great things," he'd said, apparently forgetting the recorded conversations where he called her impossible and delusional for believing she could rebuild her business. "You're right," Serena had replied. "You didn't know I was capable of great things. That's why you worked so hard to prevent me from achieving them." The final humiliation came not through revenge, but through irrelevance. The Wellington family, who had once commanded social respect through inherited wealth and manufactured prestige, found themselves increasingly marginalized in a city that was rapidly changing its definition of what mattered. Eleanor Wellington, who had once dismissed Serena as people with casual cruelty, now found her charity events poorly attended and her social influence diminished. Marcus Sr.'s investment firm had lost so many clients that he'd been forced to merge with a competitor, accepting a junior partner role in what had once been his family's empire. They hadn't been destroyed. Serena was too strategic for such crude revenge. Instead, they had been made obsolete, their particular brand of inherited prejudice rendered powerless in a world where merit and innovation mattered more than bloodlines and social registers. But perhaps the most poetic justice was watching their attempts to reconnect with Michael and Grace during their court-mandated visitation time. The children, now secure in their mother's love and their own worth, no longer needed the Wellington family's approval or feared their disapproval. They were polite but distant, treating their father's family with the kind of careful courtesy one might show to strangers. "They've changed," Eleanor had complained to Marcus after one particularly awkward visit. "They're not grateful anymore. Grateful for the privilege of being tolerated by people who had never truly accepted them. The final scene played out not in a courtroom or corporate boardroom, but in Central Park on a sunny Saturday afternoon. Serena sat on a bench watching Michael and Grace play with a diverse group of children from a new school, their laughter echoing across the playground where differences in background and skin color were simply irrelevant details rather than social categories. Her phone buzzed with messages from world leaders seeking meetings, from universities offering honorary degrees, from magazines requesting interviews about her rise from lottery winner to social justice pioneer. But the notification that made her smile came from Grace's teacher. A photo of her daughter's latest artwork, a family portrait that showed all of them, including their new dog, Chance, standing in front of their home with the caption, "My family is perfect just the way it is." Everyone had mocked the black woman after her divorce, assuming her story was ending just as her real story was beginning. They had mistaken temporary circumstances for permanent limitations, had confused their prejudices for accurate assessments of her character and potential. Now they lined up to request meetings, to seek her endorsement, to associate themselves with her success. The very people who had been so certain she didn't belong in their world were now desperate to belong in hers. But Serena wasn't interested in gatekeeping or exclusion. The world she was building had room for everyone, as long as they were willing to treat everyone else like human beings worthy of dignity and respect. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about succeeding so completely that their opinions become irrelevant, while ensuring they can never treat anyone else the way they treated you. The lottery ticket had given her $800 million, but discovering what she was capable of when all the artificial limitations were removed, that was priceless. Everyone mocked her when she was down, but now they beg for her attention. Isn't it funny how success changes everything? If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. It's more than just a click, it's an act of love. And don't forget, my most personal stories live only in my newsletter. You'll find a link in the description. Join us.